the fallout from this signal leak, which has gone all over the world. It's very big news here in Australia, you might be surprised. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt has come out and blasted the whistleblower and Atlantic editor-in-chief Jeffrey Goldberg as saying he's a discredited anti-Trump sensationalist reporter. Now, I think we can all agree on that, but the question, though, is who is responsible for letting this knucklehead into the chat?
I think Mike Waltz, the national security advisor, has admitted that he was the person that let him into the chat. And frankly, that's, to me, the biggest issue, right? Because if the platform is authorized, which according to the CIA director in open testimony the other day, he said that the CIA installed that platform on his computer, Signal. If the platform is authorized, and the sin is allowing a reporter of that caliber, which is not much. Jeffrey Goldberg, in my opinion, is probably one of the biggest scumbags in the media landscape. I don't call him a journalist. I've had to personally deal with the guy, and I will tell you, I mean, he literally makes scumbags look like good people. So Caroline's right on that. I mean, he is a horrible person. I think now that we know all the information from the chat, we go back and we look. He started this whole thing by saying secret war plans revealed. Those weren't war plans. I've been around national security for almost 3 decades. Those were not war plans. He talks about classified. He sensationalized his story, hyped it up, and frankly lied about the nature of it. You can say that it was sensitive, that it was inappropriate, that it was wrong, whatever. But the reality is those words have meaning in the national security space. He lied to get clicks, and we know that now, and Caroline's absolutely right.
And how do you rate the White House's response here? I mean, they seem to be very much digging in. They're not giving the left any of the scalps that they seem to want out of that. I personally think that that's the correct thing to do because, you know, you give them any quarter and they're just going to keep coming at you. How do you rate how the White House has handled this as a former press secretary yourself?
Well, it's a great question, James, because obviously, you know, on a personal level, I've been there. So I know what it's like to deal with this. There's a lot of entities in this particular situation, the CIA, the DNI, Secretary of Defense, National Security Advisor. So when you have to coordinate all of the response to that, sometimes it can be a little bit cumbersome because you're trying to get everybody on the same page. You're trying to remake something, get everyone to talk. So I have a sense of empathy for the White House comms team as they respond to this. I also know almost everybody on that chain personally, including Mike Waltz. And I think Mike Waltz is a good man. He's a man of integrity. He has served our country not only honorably, but he was a special forces guy in the Green Berets. He's gone overseas. He understands diplomacy, soft power really well. And I think he's a huge addition for this administration and for our country. That being said, look, I think when you deconstruct this, and we were doing this for a moment, I know you're talking to Mick about this. The platform itself was authorized. We know that. The CIA has said that in open testimony now. Mike Waltz has taken responsibility for bringing that journalist into the chat. Had it not been for that, we wouldn't be having this conversation, right? Pete Hegseth, I know a lot of people who don't have any familiarity with dealing with national security or don't have a clearance or don't have proper training love to surmise what was in there and what wasn't in the level. That's not their call, right? Those things all have meaning. You can say it was inappropriate, it was sensitive, confidential, whatever, but all of those terms, secret, top secret, TS, SCI, all have meanings within our government. And so the Pete Hegseth tweeted out, I think it was in the last 24 hours, there was no targeting information, no timing, no names, no nothing. I mean, so again, what is the sin except for allowing Jeffrey Goldberg into this chat accidentally? And I think that is a sin. I've made personal mistakes, not at that level and not of a national security nature during my tenure. So I have some empathy for these individuals. Mike Waltz has owned up to the mistake of letting him in. And I think they've all learned a very valuable lesson in this.
And, I mean, God forbid we find out people think the Europeans are freeloaders on defense. But, hey, Sean, I want to ask you also about something else here, too. I think this is a great move here. It's the latest executive order signed by President Trump. Now, this seems to me like one of these 80-20 no-brainer issues requiring proof of citizenship on voter registration forms, which will also direct state and local officials to verify the information. Can you imagine that? I think it's great, but tell me about, there's going to be a big fight over this, I imagine. Am I right?
Yeah, just one little statistic for you that you might want to find interesting on this, James. Do you realize that every single state that Kamala Harris won in the last election does not require voter ID? not a one. She didn't win a single state that requires it. I'm just saying that's a fact, not making any implications. But here's my question for you. The Democrats love to talk about how voter ID disproportionately affects poor people. Okay, if that's the argument, then why are we requiring voter ID when you require government benefits, right? So financial support, food stamps, VA support, Medicaid, Medicare, medical services, those all require an ID. The only place that they don't want you to have one is when it comes to vote, our most precious right as Americans. And you have to ask yourself, why is that the case? If you require them to have one for every other transaction, why is it the one place you don't want them to have it is when it comes to vote? Unless, of course, you've got some kind of nefarious reason. And the same thing comes with mail-in voting. It was President Carter, a very progressive liberal Democrat, who chaired a commission in the United States warning of the potential of fraud in mail-in balloting. Not to mention just the pure idea that it defies common sense, that if you mail everyone a ballot, that it's pretty much, the ability to tamper with that is much higher than having to go into a polling station and present a government ID. So you have to ask yourself, what are the motives of the people who oppose that? And I think it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to show an ID to get into buildings and buy a 6-pack of beer and get on a plane, so why not to vote? I don't know. Hey, before I let you go, Sean, some pretty shocking words by Democrat Jasmine Crockett talking about Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who happens to be in a wheelchair. Have a look at what she had to say about the governor.
Y'all know we got Governor Hot Wheels down there. Come on now. And the only thing hot about him is that he is a hot-ass mess, honey. So yes.
Wow, some really high-class comments there, calling a guy in a wheelchair Hot Wheels. What do you make of it? And I think she's kind of doubled down on this and isn't even backing down.
No. It's three things I'd say about this. One, it really speaks to her as an individual. Two, it speaks to the broader position of the Democratic Party that no one in their party has spoken out against it. And three, it speaks to the media in the United States that has failed to hold her accountable, to ask her to apologize outside of like Fox News. Nobody's asked her to apologize. Nobody's asked her to explain it. It just shows you where we are as a country and the passes that they get on the left when they say outrageous and insulting things like this. But I will just give your viewers a tease. I've got a video coming out over the weekend on my YouTube page for the people who subscribe, and that really does a deep dive into who this Jasmine Crockett individual is. And I talked about her on the show, my podcast today as well. But she's given us a ton of great material to play with over the next few days. Oh, wow.
Fantastic, Sean. Well, we'll all check that out on the Sean Spicer Show. Everybody go check that out. Thank you for your time.